I was in my late teens. My grandparents on my mother's side were faithful Christian people. They wanted to help me in my pursuit of God's purpose for my life. So one year for my birthday, they handed me a large, heavy box. I opened the box to find the 6 volumes of Matthew Henry's complete commentary of the Bible. Matthew Henry's commentaries were my first significant Bible study tool. I've consulted them thousands of times over the years, and they still hold a prominent place in my shelf right behind my desk. It's so easy to take for granted, to underestimate the ministries, or to doubt the zeal and the fire of preachers of the past whose names have become so familiar to us, especially when you see paintings of them with the black robes and the white wigs and the grim looks on their faces. But when you read the details of their lives and ministries, you develop a brand new appreciation for how the Lord has used them for His glory. Matthew Henry was born into a godly Christian home in Broad Oak, Flintshire in Wales in October of 1662. Matthew Henry's dad was a non-conforming preacher who'd been kicked out of the ministry as a result of Parliament's infamous Act of Uniformity. Matthew had 1 brother and 4 sisters. He could read the Bible clearly when he was just 3 years old, and he loved books from his early childhood. Matthew was educated mostly by his father, with some occasional help from tutors. When he was 18, Matthew began his education at the Thomas Doolittle Academy until persecution forced the school to close 2 years later. He went to law school when he was 23, and at the same time, he studied theology on his own. By that time, the enforcement of the Act of Uniformity had been relaxed, and at age 24, Matthew Henry began preaching throughout his hometown. A year later, he was ordained, and that same year, 1687, he was asked to help start a nonconformist Presbyterian church in Chester, in Cheshire, England, where he would pastor for the next 25 years. The same year he started the church, Matthew Henry was married. But 2 years into their marriage, his wife Catherine died in childbirth. He remarried a year later, and Matthew and his new wife Mary would go on to have 9 children. The church in Chester grew to 350 people, and in 1700, 13 years after they started, the church built a larger building. 6 years after that, they added a balcony to accommodate the crowds. Matthew Henry preached regularly in the prisons. He routinely preached in nearby villages where there was no pastor. Matthew Henry believed in and practiced diligent, thorough sermon preparation. His philosophy of preaching was, choose for your pulpit subjects the plainest and most needful truths, and endeavor to make them plainer. He rose at 4 o'clock each morning, and he often studied 8 hours a day. Matthew Henry began working on his Bible commentary in 1704, when he was 42 years old, and he worked on it diligently until he died in 1714. After he started publishing parts of his commentary, he received many opportunities to preach, so that in addition to his own church, he was preaching somewhere every day of the week, often 2 or 3 times a day. By the time of his death, he had finished Genesis through Acts of his commentary. Then after Matthew Henry died unexpectedly, some of his preacher friends pored over his years of Bible study notes, and they assembled Romans through Revelation. There are many great Bible commentaries available to believers, but few have had as great an impact, directly and indirectly, as Matthew Henry's Bible commentary. Men who have influenced multitudes for generations were powerfully influenced by the writings of Matthew Henry. John Wesley wrote that Matthew Henry's commentary does not entertain us with vain speculations, but is practical throughout, and spiritual too, teaching us how to worship God, not in form only, but in spirit and in truth. George Whitefield studied and prayed over Matthew Henry's comments on the Scriptures from 5 to 6 o'clock every morning. Whitefield's biographer wrote that listening to him preach was often like reading directly from Matthew Henry's commentary. Charles Spurgeon said that every preacher ought to read Matthew Henry's commentary through carefully at least one time. As a small sample of his work, listen to this portion of Matthew Henry's observations on John 1:1. In the beginning was the Word. This bespeaks his existence, not only before his incarnation, but before all time, the beginning of time, in which all creatures were produced and brought into being, found this eternal Word in being. The world was from the beginning, but the Word was in the beginning. The Word had a being before the world had a beginning. He that was in the beginning never began, and therefore was ever, without beginning of time. On June 21st, 1714, Matthew Henry was riding horseback to a preaching engagement when his horse threw him, and Matthew hit the ground hard. He insisted he wasn't injured, but when he preached that night, the people noticed that he lacked his normal energy behind the pulpit. After the service, he was extremely tired, and at 8 o'clock the next morning, 4 months shy of his 52nd birthday, Matthew Henry went to heaven. His life's work continues to impact believers today. Christian, the holy combination of knowledge and zeal is a powerful tool for God's glory. Stay the course.